worked our way up the board from lowest win totals towards the middle of the board now. Patriots, Panthers, Broncos, Commanders, Titans, Raiders, Giants, Seahawks, Cardinals, now Buccaneers, all being previewed day by day. Zach Blobner of 95.3 WDAE in Tampa, Joe, says over the 7.5, over the 8.5. He'll even go over the 9.5, which I've seen one place has posted out there still at like a 2-1 number. And he'll take 3-1 to win the division. So we are 10 for 10 now on our insiders, giving us an over on their team's win total. Are the books just horribly wrong? Everybody's going to win more games than they're suspected to, than they're listed at this year?
What do you think?
Here's the thing. Like,
I'm not even mad about the Bucks one. I'm not even mad about it. If you're telling me pick over under about Tampa Bay, I would pick over as well. And I think a lot of his points are fair. I do believe the Falcons are more talented now, but they're running it back. The OC, we're in another situation where the OC change concerns me. Like, there's going to be a lot on this OC, and how much respect is, how responsible was Canales for the turnaround with Baker and everything they had. I am kind of surprised heading into the 2024 season that they found a way to run it all back, still with Evans and Godwin. And now K. Dotton, who was part of good part of this offense this past season. And you've got a head coach that's going to hold it down. He's going to keep the defense respectable. And the question is always going to be about the offense, the number of points that they can put on the board. But if you're asking me to make a play, I would take the over. I don't know why I'd take them for the division, but I see where there is some value there. I have no interest in New Orleans at plus 375. No interest there. Carolina, not a player until we see something out of Bryce Young. That's going to take some time to turn it around. It's really a conversation between Atlanta and Tampa Bay. Would you rather lay minus 120 or take plus 300 again with Tampa Bay? I'd probably take the 300 Tampa Bay. That is we went over some of the names on the schedule. Like, the Chargers might not be that great this year. And I wasn't even counting those in some games that they should have. They should win. And for them to get to 8 and 9, I don't think that's too much of an ask. We're not talking make the playoffs. That's plus money at plus 150. All this hinges on Baker. If you think he can do that again, then you're more positive on Tampa Bay than not.
And you mentioned the schedule. Look at their bye is in week 11, right? Look at the last 7 weeks of their schedule. I don't care that 4 of them are road games. I don't. Because you mentioned one of them's in LA against the Chargers, who, there's a question mark there about what they may look like. One of them's in Dallas on a Sunday night. We'll see what the Cowboys are. But then you've got a trip to New York against the Giants, a trip to Carolina, Vegas at home, and then you get Carolina again at home, and you get New Orleans at home to wrap things up. Like, that's 5 wins. You can get to the bye at, you could get to the bye at 500, 5-5, and still get to 10 wins when you look at the schedule that way. Now, the first 9-10 weeks of this thing, the going into the bye, actually, the final 4 weeks, like the late October, early November stretch, is brutal. Like, they got a Monday nighter against Baltimore, and then Atlanta at home, but then they go to Kansas City and they host San Francisco. Yikes. Yeah. Like, that could be a skid going into the bye that only the post-bye schedule saves you from. The question will be, do they take advantage of the soft spots early, right? Like Washington and Denver in weeks 1 and 3, sandwiched around a playoff rematch in Detroit in week 2. Start the season 2-1 and don't fall apart in the middle, leading up to the bye. They can just get to the bye 500. They could win the division at 10-7. That's the positive side of things anyway. The changes came in other spots in the division, right? And to their schedule. They're going to play, as Joe mentioned, 9 wins to win the division. They're going to play that first place schedule. They're going to face a Falcons team now that has a legitimate quarterback. So how much do those obstacles change, I guess, the expectation for what this team is capable of this year?
Yeah, very fair question. Here in Tampa Bay, though, we still believe the South runs through the Bucks, and I go back to a season ago. A lot of the same things people were bringing up about Atlanta, we were doing with New Orleans and Derek Carr coming to town for the Saints, right? Like saying, "Oh, he's a much better quarterback. Like they should have the edge." The Bucks at that time, coming off the Brady era, we're going to play a first place schedule even then, and we were looking at it like, "Wow, how is this going to work out?" For me, I feel like we have to give this team and Baker and Todd the benefit of the doubt, even with Kirk Cousins now in Atlanta specifically, because again, we just saw this movie. To me, it feels more like a sequel than a fresh set of the season. So I understand that Kirk should elevate Atlanta. You can make the argument that with Carr, just like I did with Baker, he should be more comfortable in New Orleans. We don't really bring up Carolina. That's just not something we talk about in Tampa Bay because there's no need, if we're being quite honest. But those other two squads in New Orleans and Atlanta, I think they're going to be good teams. I think they're going to be very competitive. I think Atlanta should be better. But there's a lot of things that should happen. What I know is the Bucs are going to be very comfortable with their roster and their positioning in the NFC South. And again, heavy confidence that the division still runs through here.
Over or under 7.5 wins?
I like over. Yeah, I say 9 or 10. I've been on air and on record saying I think they get to 10 wins, which is a step forward. I do think they're going to be better this year because of the offensive coordinator position and the play calling and the running game specifically. Some questions on defense. We didn't touch on that too much. I'm putting a lot of faith in the pass rush, even though I think it's an area where they're probably lacking the most. And there's been some movement in the secondary, so we'll see if Zion McCollum can hold up his end in the cornerbacks situation. And then obviously a guy like Jamel Dean's awesome. But again, can he stay on the field? Is he going to be durable? Something he's battled with. I like him over 7.5, though. And I probably wouldn't bet on them to go over 9.5, but I'll say I like him at 10 wins.
The question is, can Mayfield continue to be as productive as he was last year? You made a good point. Early in his career, Mayfield looked like this much of the time. Prop on him, 3,665 passing yards, 23.5 touchdowns. The yardage number, if Mayfield actually plays all 17 games, seems pretty low. He threw for 4,000 last year. The touchdown number, probably the same. Again, if he stays healthy, he threw for 28 touchdowns last year.
Yeah. It was close in those first couple of years. He did go over the number, but remember his rookie year, he only started 13 times, and he still went over this number. So, with the receivers that he has, I would think this is an overplay. How many games would he have to miss to go under?
2?
I'd say
2
probably
games?
two, maybe 3. Yeah, 2, maybe 3 is where I'm at on that. He's been, man, I don't know. That's tough. It's tough for me. For him to stay healthy for the entire year, it's difficult nowadays to do that in multiple seasons in a row.
It is, but they've done what they can to fortify the offensive line, right? Like the offensive line across the line pretty much is either top draft picks or, in Tristan Wirf's case, a guy working on the 5th-year option. I know he held out a mini camp, I believe it was. But they've built the offensive line pretty well. They got Barton out of Duke in the first round as their center. I'm not super worried about Mayfield getting as physically beaten up as he has in years past, assuming he doesn't start doing some of the stuff he did when he was younger, which is where he, runs around, does the chicken with the head cut off thing, which he has been prone to do early in his career. If he settles in and he feels comfortable with Liam Cohen, the new OC, I do think, like I said, Evans and Godwin aren't getting any younger either. This should look something like what we got from, say, for example, Stafford when he was healthy, working with Nakua and Kupp. I mean, it should be read the progression, get the ball out, don't get hit.
Evans, 1,255 last year, 13 touchdowns in a contract year. The number's 8.5 touchdowns. That seems pretty short. if you're expecting to get Evans out there the entire year, I mean, he has those multiple touchdown games in him still.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any question about that. Now, Godwin is the guy that he also had over 1,000 yards. Are both guys going to get over 1,000 yards again? Not sure about that. But at times, it would feel like he was lost in the offense, where he wouldn't get as many looks as Evans. And I'm not saying that's the wrong approach. And some of it was stat chasing at the end. Like, he was breaking Bucs all-time records late in the season. So he was making sure to hook up Evans a number of times. But these Evans numbers do seem pretty short. Do they not?
Evans, the touchdown number 8.5. Like, if they're trying to diversify the way they, spread the football around in the red zone, I could see them maybe not getting to that 8.5. We talked about how Cade Otton was increasingly more involved in the offense last year. The Godwin number, so I'm with you on the yardage numbers. The touchdown numbers, like, we've seen Chris Godwin have 7, 8, 9 touchdowns multiple years in a row earlier in his career. And it wasn't because those were necessarily Tom Brady seasons. One of them was, I think. But he's had, he had an all-pro or Pro Bowl season, I should say, in 2019, catching 9 touchdowns and 86 passes in 14 games. Mike Evans was on that team. And so that's where I come around to, how do they manage the offense? I didn't see any Cade Otton numbers listed. That would be something I'd be interested in. Again, I'm going to make the Rams comparison because that's where Liam Cohen comes from. Do they use Otton kind of like a Tyler Higbee was used by the Rams in the red zone last year and the year before? That's something I think worth keeping an eye on. That could take some touchdowns away from Godwin and Evans.
Are they going to mix it up? They draft a guy. When you draft a running back, they're not what sometimes teams do with quarterbacks where they're going to sit and watch. He's going to play.
Right.
So
they get thrown in.
The way they used White in year 2, borderline crazy. And it's what you typically see in this league. Let's get as much as we can out of this guy for 3-4 years, cut him loose, get the next guy in. He had 272 carries, 64 receptions. That is a ton of touches in today's game. A ton. And if you look at some of the numbers, I don't believe he was one of the more efficient backs out there. So they used him up a bunch. So then when is that going to catch up to him? Is it year 3? Is it year 4? That's what would concern me. They drafted a guy, got 1 million touches last year, over 300 touches, and now what's he going to do in this upcoming season? I would be scared about taking any Rachaad White overs.